It is 12:59. Good afternoon. I'm Lucas Panzica. Mike Vrabel spoke to the media earlier today, saying left tackle Taylor Lewan should be coming back to practice this week as he gets ready to be activated off the COVID list. Vrabel also said linebacker David Long should be getting back to practice this week as well. Long has not played since Sunday Night Football at the L.A. Rams. Titans placed defensive lineman Danico Autry and linebacker Jayon Brown on the COVID list on Tuesday. The NFL and the NFLPA did agree to reduce COVID isolation time to 5 days. That matches the latest announcement from the CDC. SEC play begins tonight for Tennessee basketball at Alabama. The 14th-ranked Vols against the 19th-ranked Crimson Tide. Tip-off at 8 p.m. Catch the Vol Network coverage right here on The Zone. Preds are back in action after almost 2 weeks off due to the NHL's COVID pause. Still riding a 7-game win streak. They are at the Capitals. Puck drops tonight at 6 p.m. And sad news in the NFL. Hall of Famer John Madden passed away unexpectedly on Tuesday. Madden was 85 years old. For all your foundation repair and waterproofing needs, visit USSTN.com. Breaking news at once on your home for the Titans and Vols. This is 104.5 The Zone.
Blaine and Mickey 104.5 The Zone. Hey, keep your head on a swivel today, folks. Weather's supposed to get a little weird. If anything happens, we'll let you know over the next couple of hours. Blaine is out. The hitman getting a little bit more time away. Alex Apple filling in for Blaine again today. We got Lucas back. Lucas
That's really the big addition. Yeah.
He's wearing a Ferrari shirt. Is there a story behind that?
My girlfriend got me this shirt when she went to the F1 race in Austin this year.
Okay. I knew there was a story behind it. Okay.
Yeah. Little story. And as an Italian, I'm obligated to support Ferrari in Formula One.
My 7-year-old son would freak out over that shirt. He is all about cars. He loves. Oh my gosh, he would know what that was. He's all about cars. So yesterday we start the show, and right now just the thing that everybody is talking about is COVID and who's going to play and who's in and who's out. And so ambiguous isn't the right word, but just the language about when you enter and when you can get out and when does 5 days start and when do 5 days enter. We had a long discussion about that, and it didn't feel like we really had our arms around it based on what was available.
Frustratingly vague, I think, is how you would put it. And we didn't know. We were also talking yesterday, will the NFL change its protocol? Lo and behold, they have. But, and honestly, reading the memo that the league sent out yesterday, I feel like I have a better understanding of how the protocols work now, today, than I have at any other point in the future. And hopefully they stick with that for a while. Finally got a hang of it, now that I say that, they'll change it next week, I'm sure. But
oh, sure. I felt like I had a better understanding of how you got a black eye from your cat than I did.
Yeah, I think that was fair yesterday. Probably our listeners as well.
Yeah. If you're watching on Zone TV, you can see Alex has a black eye. He got it from his cat. That's a long story. So here we go. So yesterday the news was this, and this had broken, I guess, late the night before. The CDC, Center for Disease Control, had said, based on how things are now, this current Omicron variant that everybody seems to be getting, they cut the days in quarantine. If you're asymptomatic, if you have symptoms, you still keep on living.
That's another matter.
That's another matter. But if you're asymptomatic, and there are people who are, 5 days of quarantine would do it. That would get you out. So we had the discussion, and some of you out there have to be doctors or lawyers or nurses or somebody who understand all this stuff. And I thought, okay, somebody will tweet us, but nobody did. Okay, if you start, let's say, in any given week and you test positive, but you stay asymptomatic, what would it take for you to get out? So this was in multiple stories yesterday, but I finally found a story. ESPN reported in a story about Carson Wentz, you had to test positive on Monday at the latest to play on Sunday. Because our thing was, okay, so if, let's say you test positive on a Tuesday. So is it Tuesday?
But that still doesn't make sense to me.
Is it Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday? We were asking, how does that work?
To play Sunday, do you have to be out of it by Saturday?
Yes.
You can't get out of it on Sunday morning.
It sounds like, they said ESPN reported the test had to happen on Monday, the positive test, to play on the next Sunday. So that would mean Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. So Tuesday would count as until Tuesday, then until Wednesday.
It starts the day after your test.
That is one day, 24 hours later is
Right.
bingo.
Is
like,
one.
like if there's a calendar.
You don't test on Monday and say, okay, Monday's one. So that means for the Titans, then the crop of Bud Dupree and Julio, and I think it was Nick Westbrook-Akina, somebody else, those guys, if they're asymptomatic, have a chance to play, right? We found out about that on Monday. So the question is, do we find out about it on the day that they test, or do we find out about it the next day? We don't really know that, I don't think. Lucas, do we know that? I don't know that we know that.
So let's say
I think we find out.
Let's say they test positive on Monday. The positive test comes out. Does it happen later in the day and we find out about it on Tuesday? Here's the Titans timeline. Going back and looking through my notes. Their COVID moves on Tuesday, Danico Autry, Jayon Brown, and Cody Hollister. That was Tuesday. Meaning if they're, just per this ESPN report, if they tested positive on Monday, but we found out on Tuesday, they're okay. If we found out on Tuesday that they tested positive on Tuesday, per this ESPN report, they can't play on Sunday.
So actually, I think we've just worked our way to an answer there. So Bud Dupree and Julio and those guys, we find out that they've tested positive on Monday.
We found out Tuesday.
No, we found out Monday.
Monday was Bud Dupree, Julio, Buster Screen, and Westbrook-Akina.
And
that was Monday.
They don't test on game day. Well, actually, it wasn't game day for the Titans, so maybe they did test on Sunday.
Either way, they're clear if they're asymptomatic. Any and all of those guys.
You're right.
Because I think
we've worked our way to an answer.
Even if they tested on Monday and we found out on Monday, Bud Dupree, Julio Jones, Buster Screen, and Nick Westbrook-Akina, technically, if they are asymptomatic, could come back. The question will be for Danico, Jayon, Cody Hollister, and then, Danico, Jayon, Cody Hollister. That would be the ones based on their test timing. Now, Mike Vrabel said today Taylor Lewan is back.
So you got your left now, but is he back? Is his, no pun intended, back?
Is his back?
Play?
He's off COVID list and he'll practice. Is what Mike Vrabel said
in
today.
Some capacity. And so you've also got Nate Davis, who should have enough time. Hopefully,
he went on Christmas Day.
Hopefully he's not actually sick. You hope that then you've got a chance to get him back as well. So you've essentially got Jayon and Danico Autry. You just see some news?
No. But we're trying to figure out, is it the first day you took? Okay. The one, we got the notice on him on Christmas Eve.
Right.
So that's the 24th. 25, 26, 27, 28, 29. This is 5 days from then, which makes me wonder, did he test positive the day before?
Well, this would be the fifth day. So if he gets it on the 24th, 25-1, 26-2, 27-3, 28-4, 29-5. So this would be the fifth day. So
okay, all right.
So he could. Well, this is his fifth day then. You know what, Mickey? The point is, somebody a lot smarter than us is going to have to figure this out because we don't know when these people are coming back. This would be either if you don't count the 24th, this is day 5, so he should still be in quarantine, right? This should be the last of quarantine. So they must be counting the 24th. So maybe he tested the 23rd.
That has to be it.
Has to be it.
Okay. If that's the case,
I think we might have just figured something out.
If these detectives that you're listening to now have figured, and what a radio segment in real time doing math for you.
We're sitting here counting with our fingers.
What fantastic content this is. But anyway, we're all trying to figure this out. So we're trying to figure out who can play and who can't play. If that's the case, and his test was 23rd, we find out on Christmas Eve, then at that point, that puts everybody in play.
Right, because you would be testing the day before, and we'd be finding out the day later.
After.
And so for the Dolphins, then the guys that tested positive yesterday, I guess there's a chance that they play, but they would have to be entirely asymptomatic and get back on Saturday, no practice all week. And those were some consequential guys. I mean, Brandon Jones, their safety, probably not a household name in the NFL, but really good player.
Yeah.
Really good when you're playing a zero blitz, too, and you better have some guys back there that can move. It's so fascinating. I think at this point what we can say, I mean, I feel comfortable making this assessment. The Titans and the Dolphins right now are on relatively equal footing COVID-wise. Maybe the Titans a little bit worse given that they've got 3 receivers on there that's really hurting a position group. Neither team with 20 guys. And that's honestly what I want to see. I mean, okay, I can be a fan and I can sit around and I say that I hope that 40 Dolphins all catch COVID. They can barely fill a roster and the Titans get an easy win. But honestly, I paid for a ticket to this game before the season ticket holder, right? I want to see a good game. This is what I want. I want these two teams to be able to play, some semblance of real football. That's what I'm rooting for in all of these games. Music City Bowl tomorrow. So glad. I mean, I want to see the Vols take on a really good Purdue team. I don't want to see the Vols just whoop by 30 a Purdue team that is a semblance of what it was a month ago.
Now, there's a bunch of Vol fans who want to see them win by 30.
No, I want to see them win by 30. Yeah. I want to see them score 28 in the first quarter, but I want to see them do that against a good Purdue team.
Tomp Dog on Twitter, Tomp Dog. There's not much explanation. Tomp Dog, I don't know if it's Dr. Tomp Dog, but Tomp Dog says, that's correct, Mickey. The day you test is always considered day 0. So
okay.
the next day is 1.
So the next day is 1.
Okay. Tom Dog, just throwing out some rationale there. Thank you.
And it starts after the swab, not the positive test.
Okay.
So after the player was swabbed, it's the day after that. Like it's 24 hours after the swab was taken, not the test came back just now. Okay.
Does the test come back the same day for the guys in the NFL?
I'm not sure how long it takes for the test to come back.
There's another wrinkle.
Boy, if you're the NFL's chief medical officer, what's that guy's name? And you're listening, Sills, Dr. Sills, Alan Sills. Yeah, call us. It's Alan Sills. Call us and let us know. All right, we think maybe we figured this out, but I do know this. It talked about Carson Wentz. Any player that's going to play this week has to have tested positive no later than Monday.
But so this guy in the zone chat is saying Antonio Brown tested positive on a Tuesday and played, and it was before this latest CDC change. But I think they're testing on Monday. That goes back to what Lucas is saying. He's probably swabbed on Monday. We find out about it on a Tuesday. Can you believe we've gotten to the point where we just spent 15 minutes on the radio counting on our fingers and figuring out these? That's how much of an impact this has had in the last month.
This is where we are as people now.
That's right. This is where we are as a society.
Well, regardless, Taylor Lewan is the one guy. He is the farthest away of all the guys currently on the COVID list in this most recent round of guys going on it. Christmas Eve. That's as far as I go back with my notes. That was Taylor Lewan. He is eligible to return to practice today, which means maybe Nate Davis would be eligible to return tomorrow. And then on with this group, possibly the Monday moves that they did with Bud Dupree, Julio Jones, Buster Screen, and Nick Westbrook-Akina, all guys they could use. Roger Saffold and Elijah Bolden have already come off of COVID reserve. So maybe I could go back and look through my notes and see what day they went on, because I keep all my transactions from the Titans. All right, real-time COVID talk, just what you wanted to hear. But anyway, maybe we are at some kind of consensus here. So it's get tested. Now somebody's calling in. Maybe somebody's got this. We'll figure it out over the course of today's show, hopefully. Blake Toppmeyer said to join us. There's a lot going on in the SEC. Do bowl records matter? Because they seem to when your conference does well, then they don't seem to matter. When your conference doesn't do well, who cares about bowls? Nobody cares. Right. But when your conference is killing it in the bowls, then that always seems to be a big deal. So we'll get Blake Toppmeyer next. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about the Vols. We'll talk about the National Championship semifinals. All that stuff. Going to be a fun hour and 40 minutes or so left on Blaine and Mickey with special guest Alex Apple. Blaine and Mickey, 104.5 The Zone. Alex Apple hanging out for the Hitman today. Again, be weather aware. Could get a little weird later today. I know it's it's been a strange end of the year for all this weather stuff. So just remember to keep your eyes on the skies. Find some weather people that you trust, and keep an eye on all that stuff. We keep an eye on the phone lines now. Blake Toppmeyer joins us. Blake, how in the world are you doing this holiday season?
I'm hanging in there. You guys?
Man, we are hanging in there as well. It's so funny. We were talking about this. We're trying to do math on COVID tests for NFL teams. Like if you test positive on Tuesday, can you play on Sunday? When does the 5th day start? So we've been working through some pretty difficult stuff. But the other thing that came up early on in the show was bowl season is so funny because if your conference is killing it in bowls, then everybody tweets about it. But if your conference is not doing well in bowls, then bowls don't really matter. And we're in right now for SEC. Bowls don't really matter, right? When you're 0-4, these bowls don't matter.
And I think the truth is probably somewhere in the middle, as is so many times the case in these scenarios, right? Like, I do think the bowls can be some indication of just how good your conference really was or wasn't in a certain season, but they're certainly not the end-all, be-all, particularly with some of the COVID situations this year, particularly with the number of bowl game opt-outs. Like, Missouri lost to Army on a last-second field goal, right? Missouri's best player, Tyler Beatty, didn't play in the game. Would that have mattered in the outcome? Maybe. I mean, he was Missouri's stud all year, and he didn't play. So, and that's not really being an apologist for the conference. It's just it only tells you so much about whether a conference was really dominant or it wasn't, and it's ultimately not the thing that gets remembered. People are going to remember who won the national championship this year. 5 years from now, people will remember that. People won't remember what the ACC's bowl record was or what the SEC's bowl record was this year.
If anything, though, this year has been fascinating because I worked at a group of 5 school. And people asked me about bowl payouts once, and I said, if you play in, the Poulan Weed Whacker Bowl, there's hardly any. You just try to break even when you go. Yeah. People couldn't believe that. Well, this year they're seeing the real money amounts as teams are like, oh, wait a second, we can leave this bowl and go play in this bowl. So instead of $300,000, we can make $4 million. That may have been the most fascinating thing about all this is the actual finances for what bowls actually pay coming out.
Yeah, absolutely, and you're right. That is a common belief that is false, is that these schools get rich by appearing in bowl games, when in reality, as you said, so many of these bowl games it's like breaking even, and the real money comes in the form, for the SEC in particular, of the collective distribution for the conference. And so much of that comes from, a handful of bowls. It's not the low level bowls that are leading to this big conference distribution. It's the bowls that you would expect.
Yeah, absolutely. Blake Toppmeyer, our guest, talking SEC and college football and more here on Blaine and Mickey.
Hey, Blake, it's Alex Apple. Good to have you on with us today. I'm not sure that in looking at the 4 that have lost so far, any of them are all that surprising when you're talking about the SEC being 0-4. Handicap for us, though, the next 2. I think it's North Carolina, South Carolina, both 6-6 teams there. That's in Charlotte. And then Purdue, Tennessee coming up later that same day, I think. Maybe the SEC gets their first win in one of those. How do you look at them?
Yeah, I think so, and I think it's going to be Tennessee. I mean, South Carolina obviously became sort of a neat story toward the back half of the regular season, made it to a bowl game. I think most people, myself included, were a little surprised they were able to do that in Shane Beamer's first season. He didn't inherit a particularly strong roster, but I think North Carolina is probably the stronger team. North Carolina is a team that, frankly, I think underachieved this season, whereas I think South Carolina probably overachieved just a little bit. So I think the SEC might have to wait just a little bit longer to get that first bowl victory. I think it's going to be in the form of Tennessee. I think this is a good matchup for the Vols, particularly with a couple of Purdue's best players opting out, and Tennessee's dealing with shorthanded roster as well, with Cade Mays being ruled out of the game. Not surprising, but still, I think there was maybe some hope up until today that Cade Mays would play in that game, but he's out. Alontae Taylor, the best defensive back, is opting out. So Tennessee will be a little shorthanded as well. But I just really like the way Tennessee finished the season. I thought over the final 6 weeks or so of the season, really going back almost even to when they made a quarterback change to Hendon Hooker, I think this is a team that's functioning at a pretty high level. And I don't know how much history matters in matchups like this, but if you look at Tennessee's history in recent bowl games against the Big Ten, Tennessee's fared pretty well in those games.
And it's interesting. So I was looking at the bowl schedule here. I've got it up in front of me. I'm looking at Tennessee. It's sitting at 7-5, overachieving probably in Heupel's first season by most measures. A pretty successful first year for him as coach. Then you're looking at Arkansas, 8-4. But I think the memory of Arkansas was, if you ask the average college football fan, Arkansas was pretty good this year. I mean, didn't they make it all the way almost up to the top 10? They beat Texas earlier in the season, and right, they start 4-0, really with the only consequential win. Texas turned out to not be any good. Beating Texas A&M, a great win for sure. But then they get smoked by Georgia. They lose to Ole Miss in an absolute shootout. They lose to Auburn the very next game. It's so funny how the way that you start the season, which Tennessee has been a victim of because they play Florida, Georgia, and Alabama seemingly out of the chute every year, that really shapes memory of how your season's remembered. But you're looking at it at the end. Tennessee was one win away from the same record as Arkansas, and everybody was talking about the job that's been done down in Little Rock.
Yeah, I would agree with that, and I think even with a win in this game, I don't think anybody's really thinking of Tennessee as a top 25 team, and maybe they should be. If they do beat Purdue and finish 8-5, I think they're going to come up short of that top 25 finish, but I do think that they would belong in the conversation. And you're right, the narrative for teams sometimes gets cast a little bit early on, and with Tennessee. You look back at that Pittsburgh game, and that was really, really an opportunity missed. And then, on the heels of that, they got blown out in many respects by Florida in the end. It maybe looked a little more respectable than I think it really played out that day. But that was right around the time where Tennessee started to turn its season around. It's just the die is often cast, in the court of public opinion sometimes, after that first month of the season, at least as it gets to teams that are kind of lingering in the bottom of the top 25, where I think Tennessee sort of would belong, at least in the conversation with this game. I do think too, Arkansas maybe gets a little more respect for being in West Division. So many years in a row now has been the stronger division, and I think that was probably the case this year. Although. It's so hard to know because of the limited crossover matchups. I mean, we know Alabama and Georgia, they're there at the top. I think the West was better top to bottom, and certainly there's no Vanderbilt in the West. That helps, but it is kind of hard to know sometimes with the limited crossover matchups that we get to see there.
Blake Toppmeyer, our guest. So let's say Tennessee wins or loses this game, whatever outcome. Does it seriously diminish, or does it seriously help? I mean, obviously, one more win on anybody's final record looks good, but how much does that change the perception, a win or a loss in year one for Josh Heupel?
I think in terms of what it actually means for the program, it doesn't matter that much.
Right.
8-5, 7-6, I don't think it really matters all that much for the program. In terms of the way your program is talked about for the next 6 months, I do think it matters. I think the way teams are discussed in the off season after an 8-5 season and a 7-6 season are fairly different. I mean, you go 7-6, and it's like, well, you were one loss away from finishing below 500. You're it's a good season, but I do think when you get to 8-5, that really changes the outlook. And I think if Tennessee gets to 8-5. The off-season narrative, if you will be about, okay, Tennessee has quickly reestablished itself, at the very least in the middle of the pack, or maybe at the top of the middle of the pack in the SEC. Now, can it start reeling in some of the top dogs? If you finish 7-6, I think then the narrative is they're in there with a bunch of other middle of the pack SEC teams. So, by and large, I don't think it really matters for your program, for your long-term growth of your program. But I do think, when you're rolling into SEC media days next year, I think the way this team is discussed would be much different finishing 8-5 versus 7-6.
The other thing I think too, just with natural fan expectations, no matter how the 8th win happened, I think they think, okay, you got to win 9 next year. That stair stepping of expectations would seem to be the next natural thing. And if that's the case, let's say they do win, and you're a Vols fan, and you're thinking, hey man, you got to win 9 this year. That would be a pretty heck of a pretty nice accomplishment for Heupel and his staff, especially considering what they walked into.
Yeah, and I think, honestly, win or loss in this game, I think the expectations for Tennessee are going to bump up noticeably next year because not only just year 2 of a coaching tenure, but you look at that schedule, and that's set up about as well as a Tennessee schedule ever is going to set up. I mean, you're not going to escape Georgia, Alabama, and Florida on the schedule, but you have you have Florida with a first-year coach. You have a non-conference schedule that's really pretty weak, frankly. You have the road game against Pittsburgh, but Pittsburgh's going to be replacing Kenny Pickett. Tennessee kicked Army off its schedule in favor of Akron. So if you look at the schedule, I do think Tennessee's going to come into next season with some really high expectations, and I think 9 wins is not unfair, in terms of expectations for Tennessee in 2022.
Blake Toppmeyer, our guest at Toppmeyer on Twitter, covering the SEC for the USA Today family of publications.
And so you're heading to Alabama-Cincinnati, I think I heard, is the next game that you're going to be covering. So I'm wondering if Alabama defensive end Will Anderson has, in fact, convinced you, as he sought to do the other day, that they are, in fact, the underdogs and that nobody's given them a chance against Cincinnati.
Yeah, ain't getting no respect. That is the rallying cry of football players across America, whether you're the number 1 ranked team in the nation or whether you're ranked number 130, right? Is that nobody's giving you any respect, which, whatever, that's fine. Look, Will Anderson can get his motivation wherever he needs it, and athletes certainly get fuel a lot of times from those naysayers, and when they don't exist, you got to concoct some boogeyman in the closet that's not giving you any respect.
But
that's
a real persuasion job by Nick Saban. I mean, think about that. He has been, how many national championships he won? They're great every year. Everybody tells you you're great, and he's got these guys convinced that everybody's not saying that.
Yeah.
I mean, unless you think Will Anderson's just blowing smoke, and I don't think he does. They probably really believe that.
The thing of it is, going into the SEC championship, I think that would have been a somewhat accurate rallying cry. I think there were a lot of questions about Alabama going into the SEC championship. Georgia was the betting favorite in that game. Georgia had looked like the most dominant team for 3 months, whereas Alabama had looked inconsistent and vulnerable. But as you guys know, I mean, these things can change. The talking points can change so quickly for teams. So it's like all of that was forgotten after Alabama just comes out and steamrolls Georgia in Atlanta. Suddenly now the narrative becomes that this is an Alabama team that's finally hitting its stride, and Bryce Young is peaking, and how is Georgia or Michigan in the national championship going to deal with Alabama's speed that gave Georgia so much fits in the SEC championship? Like, nobody's talking anymore about the fact that Alabama's offensive line was really pretty mediocre for the first 3 months of the season, and that its defense was pretty inconsistent for the first 3 months of the season. Like, in one game, I think they quieted most of those doubts. And so it's like, yeah, Will Anderson's having to dial back the clock to like December 1st to come up with some of these so-called criticisms and doubts that Alabama's facing. But so it goes. And really, I think every team in this playoff, certainly if Alabama can make the case, I think unsuccessfully, but if it can try to make the case that it's the underdog, I think certainly the other 3 teams in this field can make that pitch. Certainly none more so than Cincinnati.
The other game, Georgia's just going to ride or die with Stetson Bennett, huh? And let's say something happens and they don't win. They're going to have to answer some questions.
Absolutely. I mean, this season is sort of a referendum on Kirby Smart. good, bad, or otherwise. This has been his best team in Athens, and he's had some good ones, but this is his best one. This is the season where his team was ranked number one for most of the year. This is the season where they had a great opportunity to get Alabama out of there. Like, you don't have to worry about them in the national championship game. If you beat them in the SEC game in Atlanta, they had an opportunity to deliver a knockout punch, and they whiffed. But now they get a second chance, right? They get two bites of the apple. And so if they come up short, I agree. I mean, I think this is going to be something that hangs over Kirby throughout the offseason. Maybe to a certain degree, maybe even a little unfairly so. I mean, I think what Kirby's done has been quite impressive in Georgia. He took what was already a good program and lifted it into a great program in pretty quick order. But the expectation in college football nowadays, especially when you're at these top dollar programs, is national championships. Like the days of being able to win 10 games and maybe go to a good bowl game and get a victory and call that a successful season. Like, I think at these top programs, that's come to an end. And part of that's probably with what they're paying these coaches, and part of it's probably a reflection of the what have you done for me lately society we're in now. But yeah, I think absolutely for Kirby Smart, this is a big opportunity. But if they don't cash in on this season, I do think that people aren't going to forget about how Georgia was number one for much of this season, and then let it slip away at the end.
Blake, one more question for you from me. I read your article about the top 5 environments that you covered this year. I forget exactly how many games it was that you had been to, 15, 20 games. Texas A&M, the best environment, got your top spot this year. How close was it? And if you had to pick an environment in the SEC that at its peak is the best, do you go Kyle Field? Where do you go with that?
Wow, yeah, that Kyle Field game was that was really special with number one Alabama coming into town. Night game, nobody was giving Texas A&M much chance in that game. Had 2 losses, and the place was so loud. They talk about the press box shaking there. It really does. And then when it's over, you just get thousands of fans just streaming over the wall, which conference officials say is a fine. I say it's college football at its finest, right? Seeing that scene play out. I think that was probably the clear number one for me. I had Alabama at Florida number 2. Of course, at that time, Florida didn't know its season was going to go down the drains. At that time, it was a top 10 matchup, and the swamp was really rocking that day. So after this season, I've now been at all 14 SEC venues. I was missing a couple coming into this year, and I checked them off the list this year. And for me, when each place is going at its best, Tennessee fans won't like this, but I would probably put the Swamp number 1. Just the way that stadium is built, it traps all the noise in there. And Florida fans at times can be kind of fair weather fans. Let's call it what it is. But when Florida's playing well and the Swamp's rocking, they have some deep traditions there, especially the new tradition of Tom Petty at the end of the third quarter. I think that's a tough environment to top if you're looking for sheer crowd noise. Although Kyle Field certainly this year against Alabama, I would say would go toe to toe with the Swamp.
All right, on the way out, you had also written about this, and I thought it was an interesting look. And Mike Leach had basically gotten after guys for opting out of bowl games, and then you got after Mike Leach.
Yeah, I think for these coaches, look, I don't love, as someone who likes college football, I don't love guys sitting out of bowl games either. I think it's tough to see the sport's top players get to the postseason and sit out. So from that perspective, I get it. But the last people that need to be criticizing that, I think, are coaches who bolt before bowl games all the time. If these bowl games are so important, then why is Brian Kelly at LSU and not at Notre Dame right now. And you look at Mike Leach, and he did this when he was an assistant at Oklahoma. He accepted the job, the head coaching job at Texas Tech. He didn't coach in Oklahoma's bowl game that year. He was already in the saddle at Texas Tech by the time the bowl rolled around. Which, by the way, I don't blame Mike Leach for doing that. He'd be a fool if he said, no thanks, Texas Tech. I'm going to spend the next month at Oklahoma and coach in this bowl game. Of course, he's not going to do that. But what's good for the coaches is good for the players. And we're talking about millionaire coaches and players who are not under contract. They're not being paid by the school. And I know some people out there would say, well, they're getting a scholarship for the school. Well, these guys that are opting out, they're not coming back anyway. Like their time as a student is done. The semester has ended. They're out of here. And so, it's tough to see, but I get it. And I think for Mike Leach to refuse to acknowledge the risk that these players take by stepping on the field in an extra bowl game is unfair on his end. I love to see the guys like Matt Corral that say, you know what, I'm probably gonna be a first round draft pick, but I'm gonna play in the bowl game anyway because I think it's the right thing to do by my teammates. I love seeing that. But I also think you have to acknowledge, which Mike Leach didn't, the real risk that these players take by stepping out there. We've seen guys get injured, and it hurt their draft stock by multiple rounds. We've seen that happen in bowl games. So there is a risk that these guys that are headed for the NFL take by playing in an extra game. I love seeing the guys that want to play anyway, but I certainly understand and appreciate the decision that goes into it for these guys that are headed to the NFL.
Blake, good stuff, man. Appreciate the time as always, and can't wait to catch up again soon. People need to follow Blake at @Toppmeyer. That'll get you there on Twitter. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me, guys.
Yes,
Thanks,
sir.
Blake.
Covering the SEC for USA Today. We really haven't talked about John Madden at all today, and we need to do that. Pay tribute to that man. If you got a thought or anything you want to share about Madden, absolutely hit us on Zone TV Chat on Twitter at Blaine and Mickey, or call us on the Mark Spain Real Estate Hotline 615-737-1045. Blaine and Mickey, 104.5 The Zone. Little Tom Petty. Lucas rocking a little classic rock for you today. Lucas Panzik always plays the right tunes. Alex Apple hanging out for the Hitman. We would be remiss. We started the show when we were talking about COVID testing and when does the calendar start, and do they find out the test result the day they get tested, or is it the next day? There's a culture reporter, Stephen Holder, who's one of the OG culture reporters, covered him for quite some time. He's tweeted how confused he is about Carson Wentz's timeline. Basically saying, so my understanding of his timeline is that Saturday is technically day 5. He said there was confusion earlier because of the way Frank Reich phrased it this morning, but I don't blame him. We're all confused and exhausted. That sums all that up.
Amen, baby.
Certainly no confusion or exhaustion regarding John Madden. Some people are calling him the most influential NFL figure. I thought that was a pretty amazing thing to say. He never played pro football. He played college football. He has the highest winning percentage of any coach in NFL history. There's a whole generation or two of people who only know of him as a broadcaster or the video game guy. Won a Super Bowl as the Raiders head coach, and had the Steelers not been the absolute team of the century, and
you'd think about that more. Yeah.
He would have won. The Raiders would have won. Their biggest rival at that time. I know they had an inter-divisional rival with the Chiefs always. That's been a pretty tough one. But their rivals in the 70s were the Steelers. There were books written about it. And that probably kept him from winning a second Super Bowl. We got Joe on the line from Nolansville, and he wants to talk about John Madden. Joe, thanks for calling.
Yeah, you're welcome, guys. Love the show. I'm almost 50 years old, and my biggest memory, playing football out in the yard, and every time you stuck your brother in the dirt and you looked at him and you just said, snot bubble. That's one of my, when I heard the news, that's the first thing that, just being a kid throwing the ball around the yard and just always hearing his voice, it's just iconic. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. I remember sweaty butt pants. Showing linemen and they had sweated through their pants. Sweaty butt pants is one of the things that stands out for me. But it's different for different. Boom! Everybody remembers so many things about Madden.
Yeah, and I just remember his voice was so unique. And as someone that, a kid of the 90s, growing up and getting to play some of those video games, I mean, you think about how that shaped, how that brought people into the game, and it probably is a major portion of what the NFL is today. I mean, to have what's probably been the most popular video game ever. I mean, I'm not a video game expert. If that's terribly wrong, then somebody can tell me. But to have that influence into the broadcasting influence to, continue to be a figure that has been talked about. I mean, and that name will endure now with that game as well. I don't think that's far-fetched to call him a major figure that made the NFL what it is today. I don't know that you can quantify that, but to go from coach to broadcaster and then to bring the game into a medium where so many people could interact with it and understand it. And Lucas was laughing about a funny tweet during the break. What was it? It said, I won't steal your thunder. I'll let you read it.
Well, Sando, I think, tweeted this out. John Madden's the reason why 13-year-old boys across the country are better at clock management than Mike McCarthy.
And that gets to people's understanding of the game and bringing more people into the sport that's now such an entity, and he's a major portion of it.
Somebody was asking me, I was talking about Stevie Wonder one time, and I said, Stevie Wonder's a Hall of Famer as a singer. He's a Hall of Famer as a songwriter. He's a Hall of Famer as a musician on multiple instruments. John Madden was literally a Hall of Fame football coach. He has the highest winning percentage of all time. He might be the best color commentator in the history of sports. And whether or not you liked his style, he made a very complex game very simple for people, even in the most complex of times. So he has the highest winning percentage of any NFL coach. He might be the best color commentator in the history of sports, certainly in the history of football. And then he has his name attached to something that might be, as you said, and I'm not a big gamer, might be the greatest video game of all time.
And he and Pat Summerall were so iconic for those Thanksgiving days, too. How many Thanksgivings did you listen to John Madden?
All of them.
All of them. Everybody did.
All of them. And they're... Yeah, the very excitable Madden with the very stoic.
Oh my gosh, the world's biggest stoic
with Pat
Summerall.
It was, and if you're a Frank Caliendo fan, he does an imitation of those two, and he says almost nothing for Pat, and then everything is what John says. But it's just a big loss. I didn't realize he had retired in 2009. That came out as we were sitting here, and I thought, oh my gosh, it doesn't even seem like he's been retired from broadcasting that long. Let's take one more call. Mike in Thompson Station on the Mark Spain Real Estate Hotline. Mike, thanks for calling.
Hey guys, what's going on? So, I think the NFL really, old. Well, I'm not going to necessarily old. They should, with John Madden, especially with this generation, the previous generation, the NFL wouldn't be as popular without John Madden in the football game. A lot of these kids don't identify with actually the player that they see on TV. They identify with the player they play with in the video game. So, I mean, just to take a little further, the educational part of it, kids didn't, when I was coming up, we didn't actually know the plays until we played the video game. I took a play that I ran as a child off the Madden video game and ran it the next day in a football game in high school, basically the same way I seen in the video game, scored a touchdown. So, John Madden, that guy's a legend. Rest in heaven, man. You're going to be missed, man. Love you guys. Have a good one.
My gosh,
Well said.
That's a fantastic phone call. We do need to take a break. We got hour number 2 coming up. Jordan Dajani is going to join us. We'll talk NFL headlines. We'll talk the COVID testing, everything else that's going on in the NFL policy-wise with him. Maybe carry this Madden discussion a little bit further. We'll hit it in the first segment of the next hour, too. I know he meant so much to a lot of people. So phone line's open if you want to weigh in as well, 615-737-1045.
It is 2:02. Good afternoon. I'm Lucas Panzica. Titans head coach Mike Vrabel spoke to the media earlier today in preparation for Sunday's regular season home finale against the Miami Dolphins. A win would clinch the AFC South for the Titans. Vrabel said linebacker David Long has a chance to get back to practice this week. Long has not been in action since the Titans Sunday Night Football win in L.A. Also, left tackle Taylor Lewan back at practice this week. He has been activated off of the COVID list. SEC play starts tonight for Tennessee basketball at Alabama. The 14th-ranked Vols taking on the 19th-ranked Tide. Tip-off is at 8 p.m. Catch Vol Network coverage right here on The Zone. Preds are back in action after almost a 2-week layoff due to the NHL's COVID pause. Still riding a 7-game win streak. Preds are at the Capitals. Puck drops tonight at 6 p.m. And the NFL lost a legend yesterday. John Madden passed away unexpectedly. Madden's Super Bowl winning tenure with the Raiders finished with a 759 winning percentage. It's the best in NFL history for any coach with at least 100 wins. Madden was 85 years old. For all your foundation repair and waterproofing needs, visit USSTN.com. Breaking news at once on your home for the Titans and Vols. This is 104.5 The Zone.
Thank you, 104.5 The Zone. Happy hump day, everybody. It is Wednesday on the show. It's halfway through the half day of the week show, as I refer to this every week.
Exactly halfway. Baby.
It's the nexus of the sports talk universe, which is a nod to Jerry Seinfeld, which is a nod to Brett Doherty saying that about Jerry Seinfeld each and every week at this time. Jordan Dajani is going to join us in about 20 minutes. We'll get into all the latest NFL headlines. Some good Titans news today. Mike Vrabel said Taylor Lewan was off the COVID list and would practice today. He went on Christmas Eve. That's when Taylor Lewan went on the list. So technically, Nate Davis went on Christmas Day. That would mean, if based on the NFL's new rules, it's 5 days, although we spent all of the first segment of the show wondering, is it the day you get tested positive and you find out? Is that day one? Although somebody tweeted us and said, no, that's day 0. Then the next day counts as 1. So if you test positive on Monday, Tuesday is 1. Anyway, we talked about this a whole lot off the top of the show. We do know this. Taylor Lewan is back practicing. The other thing, Lucas, I know Mike Vrabel had talked about this earlier today. David Long would return to practice in some capacity, correct? I don't think he spoke about it too long, but just that David Long would be returning to practice in some capacity today. That's good news. We wondered with Jayon Brown going on the COVID list, okay, what about Zach Cunningham? What about some of these other guys? There was a video earlier today of Zach Cunningham doing an interview before practice. So just seeing Zach Cunningham in a uniform, good news.
And he's unvaccinated, right? We know that from
I think that's one of the reasons, how he wound up here.
Yeah,
so there was some concern about him, like, oh my gosh, okay, if one of the guys in the room got to see it, I'm going to knock on this wood under the countertop here. But he obviously practiced today. There's video of him in his uniform doing an interview. All that coming out. Now, we didn't talk about this in the first hour until the very end, but we would be remiss if we didn't, if you're just getting in the car. The biggest news in the sports world today, obviously, other than this live, real-time COVID and trying to figure out who's doing what, is the passing of John Madden. And I was trying to put some thoughts together on this, and I kept thinking about it. So if you're of a certain age, you know all of the stages of John Madden. Like, I remember him growing up as John Madden coached the Raiders.
Right, and I have no memory being 10, 15 years younger than you or whatever it is,
so
of him being a coach at all.
He coached the Raiders. And then the other thing he was known for at that time, and I never knew the story, apparently Miller Lite, an advertising agency, called Al Davis and said, we want you to be in a beer commercial. He's like, I don't do that kind of stuff, but I'll tell you who'd be funny in it is John Madden, my coach. So John Madden started being in these Miller Lite commercials with great taste, less filling. And so were Bob Uecker and all these people who really became famous. It was sort of the same thing with Madden, who people only know him as a broadcaster or video game guy. There were all these sports figures from the past who were on those commercials that people are like, oh, this guy's awesome. Who's this guy?
That's kind of how he made his celebrity, is what you're saying?
It made him a huge celebrity.
Yeah.
So then he gets into broadcasting. And so John Madden he has the highest winning percentage of any coach in NFL history, 759. So he won right at 76% of his games. including a Super Bowl, and they would have won more. The Raiders were loaded with Hall of Famers in the 70s. He managed all those guys.
And there's that iconic photo of him being carried off on their shoulders.
Yeah.
That from someone that's younger, I think that's really the extent of my knowledge about his coaching tenure. Now, I will say, I mean, he has invaded and permeated pop culture in a way that most people don't get to that, right? I mean,
Sure.
Even something you mentioned it briefly, like Frank Caliendo, an iconic impressionist, imitating him, it is indistinguishable, and he has such a unique way of speaking. I mean, that's what kind of extends your legacy now. I mean, what is the life of John Madden in the public eye? I mean, 50 years worth of John Madden now in American culture, and that's what makes him so iconic and distinguishes him from some guys that, kind of had their moments, and then that fizzles away, right? Few people have that kind of staying power.
Well, the fact that, and again, I referenced this earlier, there was one of these, I don't know if it was on TV or if it was on the radio, one of these reports that comes on between our shows, the network reports, that he retired in 2009. It's 2021.
Doesn't seem like that long
and
ago,
he's
does
still
it?
relevant.
Yeah.
I mean, young people are upset that he died. There are people who are they know him only as the video guy because they're 17, 18 years old. They don't even remember him as a broadcaster.
The coincidence with him passing so closely after the special that just aired about him. Did you get a chance to watch that, by the way?
Not yet.
I didn't, but I've got it. I think we've got it recorded. It is always eerie. A lot of people, I think, had pointed to that he was looking. I think the word that they used was tired in a lot of those interviews.
Yeah.
But man, not a lot of people get to see themselves be honored like that. That's great timing, and I'm sure felt like a great honor for him.
Well, all-time winningest coach. He did win a Super Bowl. He's maybe the best all-time color commentator in any sport ever. So he's a Hall of Fame coach. He's a Hall of Fame commentator in the video game world. He's a Hall of Famer. And like you said, his voice, the way he looked, the way he sounded, the way he carried himself, he's just an icon.
And we talk about the Titans and the national media getting kind of slighted, right? That's a common refrain in national media of all sorts. The Titans have actually had two players on the Madden NFL cover, and Eddie George, I think it was 2003, was the first player. Up until then, I believe it had been always John Madden on the cover. Eddie George, the first player to appear on it. Then the Titans have Vince Young just a couple of years later. I mean, that didn't end up so well for the Titans, but Titans have had two. Not many teams have had one. And that's an honor for any player to get on that game. It shows you what that means for NFL culture, though, that is thought of as such an honor.
Or to be on the All-Madden team, which I went to college with a guy named Fred Barnett who played for the Eagles and was a great receiver. His career got cut short by injuries. He was on the All-Madden team one year. And I remember him coming back to Arkansas State. And you know what the thing he was most excited about? That he was on the All-Madden team that year. Like, he didn't make All-Pro.
Right.
He never made a Pro Bowl. He made All-Madden. And we were
Something to put on your resume.
Over the moon about that. I have a football card, Fred Barnett All-Madden.
All-Madden. That's awesome.
And that TV show, anyway, just a special guy. It means a lot to a lot of people. So rest in peace, John Madden, an icon in every way. And in a lot of ways, built this game through the video game. We had a fantastic phone call in the last segment. A gentleman called and he said, I learned about football and calling plays. He said, we ran some of the plays from Madden in high school football.
Yeah, me too. We have a picture at my house. There were T-shirts made up. Alex's Fun Football Party. I don't know. Might have been 5. Grew up on Franklin Road. We had 2 acres. My dad would stripe part of the backyard and a football field, and I was the kid that was drawing up plays, and all I knew of the plays was what I saw on, Madden 2000 that I was playing, right? Halfback dive, Hail Mary, overload left, or, toss sweep. Right, that is a lot of the way that I learned how to play football as well. I thought that was a great call that lent some great perspective to us.
Absolutely. Jamie in Mount Juliet, I think Lucas is about to send this call through, wanted to talk about John Madden. So let's take Jamie's call real quick. Hey, Jamie, thanks for checking in on the Mark Spain Real Estate Hotline. Doing great. How are you?
Right. Electric football.
The version I had was the Super Bowl with the Raiders and the Vikings that John Madden won. That's the one I had, if I'm dating myself. It sure was. Appreciate the phone call. He felt like family. That's the ultimate.
That's a good way of putting it.
That's the only thing. That's the ultimate thing that I think. Like, you'd never meet Alice Cooper, or Gene Simmons and go, you feel like family when I watch you cut your head off on stage or breathe blood and fire.
Right.
But somebody like John Madden, a broadcaster, for people who tell us, and you're a news broadcaster and a radio guy, for somebody who says, we listen to you, my family, we pick up the kids at school, listen to you on whatever it is, for somebody to mention the F word, family.
Yeah. It's the highest compliment.
It's the highest compliment we can get. And
but
John Madden
it's
was
because
family.
he'd sit there and talk about the turkey, and inside you got the duck. Or call out a turducken. Boom. I mean, that's a good Thanksgiving right there. Everybody can do that, right? That's not a great John Madden impersonation. First time I've ever done that. But, I mean, everybody knows. You start doing that, everybody knows who you're talking about. And for him to be called family for so many people, that is in broadcasting, right? When somebody tells me that, they watch me on Fox 17 or listens on the radio, the ultimate compliment. And he certainly nailed it.
Sure did. Jason in Nashville checked in. We've talked a lot about COVID and the NFL policies. We'll get into that with Jordan Dajani next. But let's get Jason's phone call right quick. Hey, Jason, thank you for checking in.
Hey, guys. Love the show. Happy New Year. Thanks for taking my call. I do want to say rest in peace to John Madden. I'm praying for his family. I wanted to hit on the COVID thing because it just seems like a lot of times that's going to play a part. I don't know how y'all feel as far as the performance of the player, because when you got a player, let's say he's on fire, he's doing, getting good numbers, and then now he's out because of COVID. Now he's just sitting there and then trying to come back and get himself back where he was at. It just seems like that plays a big part in the performance overall as a team. And it just gets frustrating because your team can actually be where they need to be, and that just sets you back. So you got to worry about injuries, and now you got to worry about COVID, and it just seems to be more complicated. I just wanted to see what you guys thought. Thanks, man.
Well, I think you nailed it, Jason. I mean, most of these guys are fit, able-bodied adults, right? So they're going to hopefully, God willing, be okay, right? COVID is not going to threaten their life. But Mickey, I mean, you're in good shape. You talked about it. I've not had COVID, but you had. It's the fatigue.
I couldn't walk around the block.
Your stamina is in. Even if you just get it a little bit, you couldn't walk around the block. I mean, to expect these guys to play an NFL football game, we talk about it at a very high level of kind of, I just hope he can play. Nate Davis should be back by Saturday. Surely he'll be fine. I mean,
I couldn't walk around the block, and we want Nate Davis to.
Okay, we don't know.
We want Nate Davis to block Jalen Phillips.
It's a good reminder that he just gave us. That right. Good luck.
Yeah. Jason Tatum of the Celtics talks about it, that he's had an inhaler ever since he had COVID.
Yeah.
I mean, and there's
Miles Garrett has talked about stuff
COVID.
like that
We
too.
don't even know the effects. I mean, but it's going to be frustrating. Sports fans, sports coach, sports player. It's going to be frustrating until it goes away. It doesn't seem like it's going away soon. So the frustration is something that everybody's going to contend with.
And there are people who have been asymptomatic and had no symptoms, but the caller was correct. I mean, there's no way that it's not affecting some of these guys. I'm not so sure that.
Well, and they talk about, not to get into a big science discussion, long COVID now.
Yeah.
Long COVID is basically like the lingering side effects that we're still figuring out.
I still can't smell
Nobody's had it
anything.
longer than a year.
Yeah.
But you might be more prone to allergies, right? I mean, so your nose is stopped up and you've got a cough and you just don't feel well. You feel tired. Something like that a year from now may affect somebody.
I ate black olives on pizza the other night, and I hated olives before
But you don't
I had
care
COVID. Now they tasted fine. What little I could taste. Jack and Lebanon, if you hold, we'll get you next, and then we'll get Jordan Dajani. Hold. We'll continue to talk NFL, Madden, Titans. We're talking all of it. Hour number 2. Well on its way here. Alex Apple sitting in for the Hitman. It's Blaine and Mickey on 104.5 The Zone. Blaine and Mickey 104.5 The Zone. Hanging out with Alex Apple, sitting in for the Hitman again today. Tomorrow there'll be Vols football on in this time slot, so you can catch the Music City Bowl, Tennessee and Purdue. We'll have Jordan Dajani on in just a second, but Jack in Lebanon was on hold and wanted to talk about John Madden. So, Jack, let's talk to you before we talk to Jordan. How you doing today?
Good. How you all doing, man? Great show.
Thanks
Thanks,
so
Jack.
much. Thank you.
I just want to say, not only being one of the greatest coaches ever, every place that he went from city to city, he took a bus. He would never fly in an airplane.
Yeah, he had that iconic Madden road
Cruiser.
trip.
Yeah.
Yep. Never would fly in the airplane. He'd always leave a couple of days before the team and get to each city that he was heading to.
Just an icon in every way. Jack, thanks for saying that. That's funny.
Was he just scared of flying? Is there a story of that?
He said, "I'm not afraid of flying. I'm afraid of dying." I think it was the quote was something like that. But
it's way more dangerous to drive. Is the irony of that?
And he rode. Many people have sort of written about his history. I think his first bus was just a Greyhound bus, and that was the deal with Greyhound. They carried him around everywhere, and he got unlimited use of the bus. But there are pictures, and it's just a Greyhound bus. Now, later it got real nice, and it had his picture on it.
But not a Greyhound bus with other people on it. Was he just traveling? I mean, he just stopped at the bus depot?
No. It was they just basically took a bus, one of those buses, and said, "This is your bus."
Yeah.
I mean, they may have stuck a bed in the back or something. But anyway, there are photos and stories that people have aired. I remember the Madden Cruiser. I did not remember the original deal he had with Greyhound of them ferrying him around the country in one of their
awesome.
Public cruisers. But yeah, John Madden, an icon in every way, and just seeing the way people have reacted of all ages to his death, who have different connections to him, whether you're the age of remembering all the stages of John Madden, or you just remember him as a broadcaster, you just remember him as a video guy. It's all pretty crazy. Jordan Dajani joins us now from CBS Sports on the Mark Spain Real Estate Hotline. We've been talking a lot today, Jordan, about John Madden. So first of all, we'll ask how in the world are you doing, and then maybe some thoughts about the passing of a real icon. And some are saying the most influential football maybe in the history of the NFL.
Hey, what's going on, guys? Thanks for having me on today. Happy birthday, by the way, earlier this week. Glad you got a day off to kind of relax.
Thank you, sir.
For sure. But yeah, man, seeing that come through the wire yesterday made me very sad. And, it's whenever a legend dies, it's kind of easy to exaggerate, what they meant to the world, if you will. But you can't exaggerate the kind of impact that John Madden had. I mean, personally speaking, I don't think I'd be on the phone with you guys on the radio if it wasn't for John Madden. I mean, that's how much he affected my life in terms of him being a color commentator, his unique style, how he kind of brought all these fans to the table that really enjoyed listening to him break down the game, how much of an interesting character he was. And then also the Madden video game. I mean, that was kind of a serious that made a serious impact on my life as a kid. I remember back in 1999, it was like one of the first video games I ever played. And ever since, I've played every single Madden NFL video game. And it sounds weird to say, but that's actually kind of how I learned the game. Yeah, my dad was a really big football fan, and I would watch games with him, but I learned how to use your timeouts. I learned situational football. I learned what a trade was. I learned what blocking was. I learned what positions were. I understood what salary caps were because of that game. And I've been playing that game ever since I was a little kid. It helped me really learn the game of football, and the rosters were updated every year. It was kind of important, and it led to my love of football and why I'm in the industry that I'm in. So, John Madden, yeah, I could go on, but he affected the industry in so many ways, which is why I think he's one of the most influential people to ever pioneer in terms of moving the NFL forward, because of the video game, because of him as a color commentator. He was Hall of Fame in that aspect. And then, of course, his major success as a coach of the Oakland Raiders as well.
Yeah, it's funny. I was going to say you've gone through all these things, and literally has the highest winning percentage in the history of the NFL. Jordan, as a head coach, he won basically 76% of his games and a Super Bowl.
Sorry, I lost you for a sec.
Well, the last thing you had mentioned was the coaching of John Madden in that aspect, and he won 76% of his games. He's got the highest winning percentage of any coach in NFL history and won a Super Bowl.
That is really crazy. And I think it's really funny, too, that there's so many kids, even maybe my age, that are young adults that don't know the kind of impact that John Madden had just on the game of football in terms of him being a coach and his style. We had former players on CBS Sports Radio last night, and it was so interesting to hear their stories in terms of how John Madden operated. And and the kind of individual he was off the field as well.
It reminds me of the story. Lenny Wilkins, who's in the Basketball Hall of Fame, one of his players asked him once, "Hey, man, did you ever play basketball?" He said, "Yeah, a little bit." Sometimes you don't even know what somebody's done before they're famous for something else. We're on with Jordan Dajani, CBS Sports. Alex Apple hanging in for the Hitman today. He's up next.
Hey, Jordan, good to talk with you. I was curious, John Madden's ability to sort of transcend just being a coach, right? To invent the game, which there won't be another guy that's able to do that. That's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. But then to broadcast and to have a lifespan of 50 years in American society is rare. I mean, when you look at the current slate of NFL rosters or recent former coaches, anybody in your mind stand out as a figure that can – they're going to have to blaze their own path, but that can sort of transcend just being a coach the way that Madden did? I mean, who's next if you had to pick one?
Oh, wow, that's a loaded question. By the way, it's good to talk to you, Alex. Hope you're doing well.
Same to you.
I would say I maybe look at one of these younger guys. I think Bill Belichick. I know he's a really quiet and kind of interesting dude, and he might seem like a candidate to retire and just be quiet as soon as he's done with football. But I feel like he's somebody who could really host different sessions, write a book, whatever it may be, to help other NFL fans and other young coaches kind of gain a glimpse into what made him special. And, he's obviously one of the candidates for what we're talking about because of how legendary he really was. He's going to be a Pro Football Hall of Famer as well. So Bill Belichick, directly comes into my mind. I'm kind of interested to see, which one of these younger guys, as soon as we get older, in a couple decades, which one of these guys who's going to end up having a lot of success in the NFL will take that success and make it something more when it comes to just everything surrounding the game of football itself. A guy that really kind of stands out to me might be Sean Mcvay. I mean, he was always tapped as this wonderkind, somebody who's going to change how offenses are played, and he kind of has affected the NFL in a short amount of time. He hasn't won a Super Bowl or anything, but he's been a relatively successful head coach. I'm always looking at different coaches or players or whatever they are, front office, general managers, who operate differently, who kind of march to the beat of their own drum and find success doing so. So that's a really loaded question. I'm sorry I don't have a great answer for you.
Well, I got another good loaded question for you, so I hope you're ready. Enough of this talk about John Madden. I got one that's just as loaded in that if you had to pick the AFC and NFC championship games right now, which two teams would you pick in it? And the reason I'm asking you about that one as opposed to the Super Bowl is I feel like you're going to get a lot of Chiefs-Packers answers.
Yeah.
I'm really more curious maybe who's your number two in each league.
Yeah, that's a good question, and I think you're 100% right. That's probably going to be everybody's Super Bowl prediction is the Chiefs and the Packers. But then again, I think the NFL world would be thoroughly entertained by a matchup of that stature. Now, as for the number two team in the AFC, that's kind of a tough question because the Tennessee Titans are sitting there currently at that number two seed. But at the same time, we're waiting on a couple of different guys to come back healthy, namely a running back by the name of Derrick Henry. I'm sure a lot of people have heard about him. The number three seed in there is the Cincinnati Bengals, and that's a team that you never know what you're going to get week in, week out. And it's kind of hard to make the argument that they're a legitimate contender to challenge the Chiefs or make the Super Bowl right here in 2021. The other team I have in mind is the Buffalo Bills. I mean, they're coming off of a huge win over the New England Patriots, but their inconsistencies have been very visible throughout the regular season as well. I mean, this same squad lost to Urban Meyer and the Jacksonville Jaguars just a couple of months ago. So when you ask me my number two in the AFC, I do have a slight lean towards the Tennessee Titans because we saw how momentous that win against the 49ers was, and hopefully they continue to get healthy. They have everything they need to be a legitimate challenger in the AFC. Now, as for the NFC, it's a lot of people, public stock seems like it's dropping on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers because they placed Leonard Fournette and Levante David on IR. Those guys are expected to come back, by the way. They did lose Chris Godwin for the rest of the season, which really hurts. But when you look at this wide receiving core, it's very possible that Mike Evans and Antonio Brown could make up the new dynamic duo through which Tom Brady wants to operate. We know they have experience in the postseason, so keep an eye on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers to be a legitimate number two or, of course, number one in the NFC. One more team. I really like the Los Angeles Rams. I think they have a good makeup on both sides of the ball. I think Matthew Stafford is really ready to grab this opportunity by the horns and affect and help this team and also his legacy of just who he is as a former number one overall pick. Try to get to the Super Bowl in his first season with the Rams. Keep an eye on that team.
On with Jordan Dajani, CBS Sports. You mentioned the Titans. Obviously, next up is the Miami Dolphins. That'll be Sunday at noon, and people can hear that here on the Zone. Shameless plug. But It's interesting. They lost 7 in a row, then they've won 7 in a row, but much ado is being made about the, not quite list of Hall of Fame quarterbacks, including, the Saints D team that they knocked off this past week.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think we all understand the Dolphins have a really good defense when they want to show up and play, but we can't make too much of their winning streak. I mean, they took down the Jets twice, the Saints D-League team, just like you mentioned, the Giants, the Panthers, the Ravens, which was a good win, I guess, back in November. This Dolphins team's really solid, and they have a chance to make the playoffs. They just have to take care of business and win their final 2 games. The thing is, the Tennessee Titans, this is a team, as I mentioned, that built some momentum for themselves moving forward. So, when it comes down to this matchup, my lean is towards the Tennessee Titans. I'm taking them to cover 3.5 points. That picks columns up on CBSSports.com, by the way. But I'm interested to see the defense versus the offense. Tennessee's offense versus Miami's defense, because, as I mentioned, Miami's defense has the potential to be one of the more formidable groups in the NFL. And this is a group that plays with a lot of energy. They're young. They got talent on all 3 levels. I want to see how they can contain the Titans, because if they can bottle up Ryan Tannehill in his passing attack, then that's going to open the door for Tua Tagovailoa, who has a lot of question marks, to take advantage, score a couple touchdowns, and have an upset over the Titans.
Yeah, 2 of the most accurate quarterback in the league right now. The addition of Julio Jones was just an unbelievable lift offensively for the Titans last week, Jordan. It's just amazing that he could come off IR. And
A.J. Brown. You said Julio.
Oh, sorry. Yes, sorry. A.J. Brown. To pick up A.J. Brown and him come right back like there was no rust, like he'd never stopped playing. Pretty amazing performance by him.
Yeah, for a second I thought you were being sarcastic about Julio Jones. I was confused. No, A.J. Brown, man, what a performance. And, I was already writing the story for CBSSports.com, laying into the offensive play calls and how this unit was playing, and I really thought I was going to lose a lot of stock in terms of how much I believed in this Titans team watching the first half against the 49ers. But they came back out, and they definitely game planned to get the ball to A.J. Brown. And what I loved about it is not that A.J. Brown had a career night and, won the game. It's that his performance just alone individually really sparked this team on both sides of the ball. It got the crowd into the game. The team started finding success. The defense started playing as if they were juiced up, and that allowed this franchise to pull off that second half comeback. It was awesome to see. I feel like we don't see that a lot when it's just one player's performance picks up the entire team and really leads them to a comeback win. So, man, that was magnificent. I was so excited to see that. And the other thing I want to bring up, too, is that we talk about momentum a lot, and momentum can be kind of a fake thing. There's a lot of teams who don't necessarily work off of their momentum they build for themselves well. I think the Titans are the opposite. I think the Titans are some team that can create momentum for themselves and really ride that into a legitimate playoff run, as we saw a couple of years ago. So that's why I think this win over San Francisco on a national stage at home was incredibly important.
It was all A.J. Brown, too. The Titans had 6 conversions of 3rd and 10 plus, the highest percentage of the highest conversion rate on 3rd and 10 plus in the last 7 years in a game in the NFL. That was pretty much all A.J. Brown. I had this question I asked Mickey during a commercial break earlier. It just kind of popped in my head about an hour ago. If you put Tua Tagovailoa on the Titans, are the Titans worse? Are they better? Are they the same? I mean, kind of size him up for us in comparison to Ryan Tannehill.
I love that question. That's interesting. So I love Tua Tagovailoa, but I think that the Titans would be worse if he was their leader. I think there's been a lot of times over the past couple of years where we've seen Ryan Tannehill make plays with his arm. And while this, this season has definitely been up and down, he was truly one of the more underrated quarterbacks for a couple of years. And I don't think we've ever been able to say that about Tua Tagovailoa, although he obviously is very young. I think Ryan Tannehill is a bit more consistent. I think he can make some throws that Tua Tagovailoa cannot make. I think Tua has potentially a very bright future in the NFL, but what I'm really scared about is his health. I'm legitimately worried that if Tua is able to weather all the bumps and bruises through a now 17-game regular season and do so well enough that he can put himself on the field and take all those reps needed to develop and turn into the product we know he's potentially possible to be. So I mean, Tua's a really good quarterback. He has a lot of potential, but I'm kind of worried about his injuries. I'm glad we have Ryan Tannehill.
Hey, on the way out, again, Jordan Dajani, our guest. So the NFL did adopt the most recent CDC recommendations of a 5-day quarantine instead of 10. nothing surprises me, Jordan. They want to play these games more than anything, and they certainly don't want to miss any playoff games. Any thoughts on the way out about the latest round of changes to the NFL's COVID protocols?
Yeah, so I'm not a COVID expert. I'm not really an expert on anything except maybe professional football. I'm kind of useless outside of that. But when it comes to the pandemic, it's interesting that we kind of shifted these rules, and this is kind of how we're handling it now. It's just kind of a weird feeling. But when it comes to the NFL adopting these new CDC recommendations, I'm absolutely all for it because these players want to play. The NFL obviously wants to generate as much revenue it possibly can. They don't want to reschedule games or cancel them. And we're building up to the playoffs here, and we've all of a sudden had to face an unprecedented coronavirus outbreak in the NFL. This latest adaptation, adjustment of the protocols, whatever you want to call it, is the best one they've had so far. And it's the most momentous one because it's going to allow players to return sooner regardless of their vaccination status. So, it warms my heart getting all the notifications today on my phone, seeing so many players be activated from the COVID list. And, there's a lot of guys that are going to be playing on Sunday that previously would not be playing under the old protocols. And one of those guys, in my opinion, I think is going to be Carson Wentz for the Colts as well.
Yeah, very well could be playing on Sunday. Hey, Jordan, great stuff, man. Wishing you a happy new year. The next time we talk to you, hard to believe it'll be 2022.
Can't believe it. All right, appreciate you guys. Have a good afternoon.
Yes, sir. Jordan Dajani, CBS Sports. All right, we'll come back. We'll wrap things up next, including a possible award for Josh Heupel that is a connection to Florida. Yeah, we'll share that. Stick around. Blaine and Mickey, 104.5 The Zone. Blaine and Mickey 104.5 The Zone. So Josh Heupel's had a nice year, a really nice year, his first year at Tennessee. And we were talking to Coach Doug Matthews a couple of weeks ago, and he highlighted, several guys in the SEC who felt like had punched above their weight. Another guy that Coach Matthews mentioned was Shane Beamer. Well, here you go. Matt Murschel, who's a college writer for the Orlando Sentinel, says Gus Malzahn, Josh Heupel, and Shane Beamer are finalists for the Steve Spurrier First-Year Coach Award. Did any of you guys know this was a thing? In your first year, there's an award for you to win. Lucas is shaking his head violently no.
Was Steve Spurrier great in his first year? Is that the bar that we're all trying to attain?
It went from Duke to Florida.
I don't remember Florida's first year with him.
Yeah, I don't remember. Anyway, that's an award, and it's a thing. It's done by the Football Writers Association. So there you go. I mean, that's
okay.
That's a credible organization.
9-2 in year one at Florida, Steve Spurrier.
Okay.
In 1990.
It's pretty good.
He'd probably tell you there's no way they should have lost those other two games.
I'm sure he would. Gus Malzahn, Josh Heupel, Shane Beamer up for that award. And there you go. So,
wow. Someone tell Ron Slay he'll be pumped.
Oh, he'll be excited.
I think I could hear Ron
won it
over
at
the break.
UCF.
And now,
He's won that award before.
He won that award?
At UCF when he went undefeated right until the bowl game.
Yes.
When he took over for Frost. And Malzahn won that award at Auburn in 2013 when he took him to the national championship.
Yeah, 1 year after leaving Arkansas State.
Yeah, right. And Auburn was coming off a 3-9 season that got Gene Chizik fired.
Yes. Boy, I thought they were going to win that sucker. I thought he's about to go from ASU to winning the national championship.
That team, the collection of running talent on that team.
Well,
one of the best ever.
They kept having stuff happen that never happened. That was the kick six, right?
And that was Jordan Hare, the Georgia game.
And Jordan Hare,
yes.
Yes.
That's right. That was that year too.
That was like 2 weeks before the Iron Bowl.
I remember people saying, "There's no way they're going to lose. When this stuff happens, you can't lose." And then they lost in the national championship. But it was
Jameis Winston happened.
Yeah, Jameis Winston happened. He sure did.
Didn't they get beat pretty bad in that game?
No, that was a great game.
It was right down to the wire.
Okay, I must misremember.
Yeah, I think Florida State ran a kickoff back for a touchdown. That was a big swing in that game.
And it got right down to the wire, but I'll never forget this. The game opened, and he took several coaches and people with him that, everybody goes, so they all went. So I knew several people who were there and part of everything. They opened the show, and within like 40 seconds of the starting of the game, they had mentioned Arkansas State. Which I don't know what the over-under was on that, but it's like, less than a year away from being the head coach at Arkansas State. And I was like, wow, we got mentioned in the national championship broadcast. Wow, this is fantastic.
Malzahn is kind of the classic coach of if you want to get rid of him, which Auburn did, you kind of got to be careful about what you ask for.
He is
kind of like the Vols getting rid of Philip Fulmer. You could do a lot worse.
He's the question of who you're going to get better.
Yeah.
Mark Richt was another one of those guys like, okay, you win 10 games a year.
And Kirby Smart is the outlier of someone who is actually better. Usually that falls on his
We got somebody better. But yeah, Gus, I wonder if Auburn fans are missing Gus with another former Arkansas State head coach, Brian Harsin.
He didn't have a losing season at Auburn. Not one. What did Brian Harsin do?
Just 6-7 because they lost yesterday.
Yeah, they lost.
Yeah. To a Houston team. Not surprising loss. That's what we were talking about with Blake Toppmeyer earlier. The 4 SEC losses so far, I'm not surprised that any of those teams lost. I'm a little surprised that Texas Tech really whooped Mississippi State.
Based on who was available to whom, that was the biggest surprise to me so far.
Easily. I thought we had a Mike Leach revenge game coming in hot.
They're going to score 60 for Mike Leach.
Texas Tech holds them to 7. Texas Tech the worst defense every year in college football.
I thought they were going to try and run that thing up Mississippi State.
If you are a defensive prospect listening to this radio show right now, do not commit to Texas Tech. Take one piece of advice from me. I wouldn't have bet that.
Which always goes back to bowl games are interesting because it's who's motivated and who's not. And you get beat like they got beat by Texas Tech, that tells me those dudes wanted to be anywhere but there.
It's always weird in the postseason. Like when the Vols had Bruce Pearl as the coach, they would lose in the first round of the SEC tournament and then go on to be a 2 seed.
Yeah.
But they didn't. It's like they didn't care. It's always interesting. I don't know. Maybe Leach. Was Leach excited about it?
Oh, he couldn't stop talking about how Texas Tech owed him money. I think he was very excited about it.
He was.
He didn't fire up very many people on that roster.
Did come up again. He did not fire up anybody on the roster, and they had surprise year this year. I mean, the fact that everybody in the SEC made a bowl game besides Vanderbilt, and I get it. There's, they're playing out of conference games. They schedule wisely so they can win those games and that kind of thing. That's the way I would do it anyway. If I was to compete for a national championship, I would schedule games that I felt like I could win as an AD. But I mean, there was all kinds of parity throughout a big section of the SEC this year, and Mississippi State was another team that achieved well within that.
Well, and Leach is a legendary offensive mind and coach, and his coaching tree is impressive. But right now, would anybody take Mike Leach over Josh Heupel?
No way.
I can't see Josh Heupel's team getting held to 7 points short of them playing Alabama.
They're
maybe
not
Alabama, Georgia gets them one of these years, 7 points.
But not some,
No, they would run.
Not
they
some
would have
bunch
hung
of dudes.
50 on Texas Tech. Texas Tech's not that good.
Yeah. The Heupel offense seems like you said, Alabama, Georgia, some of these, the highest of high-level teams.
Yeah.
May give them
Unless
some
you're playing very superior talent, that's going to work.
If you're equal talent,
you win.
You're going to win the game with Josh Heupel.
Yeah.
And that's just the way it is. Who's up for the Steve Spurrier First-Year Coach Award. All right, on the way out, here you go from Teron Davenport of ESPN. Practice update for Wednesday ahead of the Dolphins. No sign of Jackrabbit Jenkins or Corey Levin. David Long, Laurel Murchison, Taylor Lewan, who's off the COVID list. Vrabel said that earlier, all return to practice. It'd be huge to get David Long back.
Be huge to get David Long. He'd be your third linebacker. You've got Zubnar or some guys I don't know behind Cunningham and Rashaan Evans if he doesn't play. And you'd really love to have Jackrabbit too. I mean, Jackrabbit finished the game. My guess is he's a no participation, limited participation, game time decision, but probably playing on Sunday unless he's had a setback. I think Coach Mack felt it. I felt like he made the play that turned that game around and gave the Titans a win last week. Sure, it was early. That was huge. Biggest play he's made as a Titan.
By a mile. He saved the game.
Yeah.
They did score a field goal on their next possession, so they were up 10-0 after 3, but that's not like being up 14 or 17-0. I think Jackrabbit stemmed the tide of that game.
It seemed to be snowballing on them there. Yeah.
Our time is snowballing. We got to get out of here. 3HL
already.
coming up next, so you don't want to miss that. They'll get you the rest of the way home, and we'll catch up with you later tomorrow. Vols football right here on the Zone.
Ron Slay's about to be fired up for some Vols basketball tonight. You know that.
You know he will. Stick around. You'll hear all about it. That's coming up next. And as always, we end the show with one thing.
Peace.